It's California in the late 1960s, and Charles Manson, fresh out of prison and before his notorious murder rampage, attracts teenagers to join his hippie commune.
The whole thing is almost like this date with destiny.
Where it was like, Charlie, Diane is here. And I was just like flabbergasted. The girls totally enfolded me as a sister, and they were a family.
He started really fascinating me and seemed just to know me through and through.
Manson descends into madness and his belief in an apocalyptic vision.
Can you see the blood, on my hands? It's because I died for you.
They are believing that he is God, therefore he is infallible.
And he even sends his minions in a crusade to kill for him.
He told them to just commit horrible murders and to make it as horrible as possible. And then, he left. He let them do it. California was really a hotbed of the hippie movement. Teenagers sought a better life. The summer of 1969 was dubbed the Summer of Love. But on August 9th and August 10th, the feeling of that summer was changed forever.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird religious rite, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Ms. Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Ms. Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant. The bodies had been dead about 12 hours. They were discovered this morning by a maid who ran screaming to neighbors. One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before." 24 hours later, another gruesome murder scene is discovered nearby. 15 miles away in the Silver Lake section of Los Angeles, market owner Tate-LaBianca and his wife Rosemary were found by their children stabbed and mutilated. 5 months later, the public would get their first glimpse of the world's most notorious cult leader, 33-year-old Charles Manson, and the bizarre group of men and women calling themselves the Manson Family.
Fine, how are you?
Good, you happy? With your courts?
Yeah.
Are you happy with it? Am I happy? Yeah. Your court, I wouldn't accept it.
And I remember watching some footage taken after the arrests and of the Manson family, and it was chilling. These people believed Charles Manson was God.
My name is Diane Lake, and I was the youngest member of the Manson family, and I lived with him for 2 years.
Like so many others during the 60s, Diane Lake's parents dropped out to seek a different life and moved their family to the Hog Farm, one of America's oldest hippie communes in Los Angeles.
My father was the one that introduced me to LSD. I remember having an experience on that trip where I felt like a big cable had been cut between me and my parents.
Even though she's just 13 years old, Diane is granted permission to leave the farm and explore the thriving hippie scene on her own.
The whole thing is almost like this date with destiny, because Black Bus Charlie, as he was called at the time, had gone to the hog farm. Diane's mother gave a photograph of Diane to Charlie and the girls, as they were called, and said, "If you see our daughter, tell her we'd love to see her again."
A few months later, Diane bumps into the group at a party in Los Angeles.
It was like, Charlie, Diane is here. And I was just like flabbergasted. How do you know me? But, Charlie came over and they were all gushing. "Oh, we're so glad you're here. We were looking for you." And it just felt really magical. The girls totally enfolded me as, you know, a sister, and they were a family. Charlie took me, you know, by the hand and led me down that evening, made love to me like I'd never been made love to before. It was very special, and I think that experience was like a drug.
And through this sex ritual, Diane Lake became a member of the Manson family. She was only 14 years old.
Charles Manson was incarcerated from the time he was a child until he was in his 30s. And when he walked out of prison, you know, during the Summer of Love, and he came out into that counterculture hippie world, he realized that those naive young people were not in any way equipped or prepared to deal with him. And so he found women, vulnerable young women, teenagers really, a lot of them, very young.
He was obviously, from many accounts, a very abused and abandoned young boy. His mother basically sent him to Boys Town so that she could be with another man, when he, as a little boy, was expecting that when she got out of jail, because she was a prostitute, that she was gonna get her son and they were gonna live together happily. So he had a lot of ego wounds.
Here was this guy, he was like a well-oiled manipulation machine. And he had run his little con games and studied manipulation.
The family wanted me to stay with them, and they were planning a trip to New Mexico. And it was like I had to make a decision. I made the decision to go with Charlie.
Diane Lake joins Manson and his group of followers into a journey that will become a roller coaster ride. During the 1969 Summer of Love, Charles Manson is released from prison and seizes an opportunity to take advantage of the impressionable hippie community in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco. He establishes himself as a charismatic guru and starts a cult called by some as the Family.
My name is Catherine Scher. I was known in the 60s as Gypsy. Well, the first time I saw Charlie, he looked like an old scruffy cowboy. While we were driving, I realized that he wasn't. He was looking in the rearview mirror and asking me some pretty poignant questions. I didn't know that at the time that it was Charles Manson. This is not your typical what you think of as a cult, because it started out just a lot of people were living in communes and whatever. Charlie wasn't acting like a cult leader. He was acting like our best friend and cared about us and everything.
A cult wants someone who is at a turning point in life where there's something that's not satisfying them, because then they're seeking. It's a perfect match.
Charles Manson was incredibly charming, very smooth talker, charismatic. He was a little man, and I think that he grew up in prison, and it must have been very difficult for him. I think that may have scarred him for life, and he certainly was a survivor. But he had very little empathy for anyone. He always blamed everyone else for what happened. He never took responsibility for anything, and he scapegoated his girls. He scapegoated his followers. He wanted to blame them for everything. Very similar to other cult leaders that I have met. They're never wrong, they're always right.
Charlie had his back to us, and he was wearing this robe, and there was a young man lying prostrate at his feet, thanking him for freeing him and crying. And that was Charlie. And he was saying, "That's all right, brother, just give it all to me. And just be free of all that." He started really fascinating me.
Newcomers are easily seduced by the deep affection exhibited between the Manson family members.
I had instant sisters, only child, adopted. I had the, orphan syndrome where I'm constantly trying to make family out of people. And there it was, the family I had been looking for.
Lynette Fromm and I had a closer connection with her than any of the other girls. And Mary Bruner was kind of like our mother figure. Patty Krenwinkel was like the Mother Earth. She was just a very natural, nurturing kind of person. Susan Atkins was a little bit more worldly. So she had more street smarts.
The Manson family loads into an old school bus and takes off on a cross-country adventure.
When we were traveling, it was basically just, traveling from friend to friend. And usually Charlie had somebody else driving. And he would play the guitar and we would sit around in a circle and sing, smoke marijuana, take LSD, have sex.
Sex is a fundamental way for the family to bond, and it becomes one of their most sacred rituals.
We'd be in a circle and he'd give out, the LSD like a sacrament. And then he would take off, maybe his shirt, and he'd help the next person take off their shirt. And then instruct that person to help the next person take off their shirt. And it was just, kind of a round robin. And it just would evolve into like a group sex. But he definitely orchestrated.
Wanted them to be very experienced in all forms of lovemaking. Little did they know, or little did Diane know, that would come in handy for him later on as he was using them as a physical asset, like money.
Charlie encouraged us to bring other people into the fold, but he wanted them to be able to offer something to the family, and they had to be, good looking, have money.
He gave them names. He told them what to do. He orchestrated all the sex sessions. He told them when they could take drugs, when they could not take drugs. He told them when they would have to sit and listen to him pontificate upon hours.
March 1968. The family moves on to Spahn's Movie Ranch, an Old West town built as a movie location and horseback riding stable. The 55-acre ranch is run by a blind 80-year-old cowboy named George Spahn.
Charlie had us taking care of George, cleaning his house, servicing his sexual needs, and just being there, being like a companion. So George loved that.
While they were there, it was like a magical time. They would dress up, there were horses, they worked in the stables, they helped plan some of the horse tours. It was a time when they were comfortable with each other. This time was not a time of darkness.
Manson's free-loving, drug-fueled community had grown to about 30 people, including Charles Watson, who they called Tex.
It's amazing because Tex Watson was the All-American. He was voted most likely to succeed. He was a football player. And he became one of the most dedicated, devoted followers of Charles Manson.
Manson begins to speak about himself as being man's son, the son of man, and shares a personal spiritual experience with the group.
He'd have this crucifixion experience on acid with Mary there, and then he would reenact that. Can you see the blood, on my hands? It's because I died for you. You could just imagine. I remember seeing like blood coming from his hands, but I think it was just the power of suggestion, and and he was really believing it. I think he really did.
He would give them the hallucinogenic drugs, and while they were under the influence and very suggestible, he would guide their trip and he would manipulate their minds.
Music would play an important role in the sordid tale of the Manson family.
And he thought, I'm a pretty good songwriter, I'm a poet, I can sing, I can strum my guitar, I can be a star.
Pretty girl, pretty girl, cease to exist, just come and say you love me.
Manson saw an opportunity with Dennis Wilson, drummer for the Beach Boys.
A couple of the girls were hitchhiking and Dennis Wilson picked them up. And so that's how they introduced Dennis Wilson to Charles Manson. I think Dennis was very much enthralled or captured by Charlie's charisma.
Another appeal to Dennis was the girls, because Manson offered him the girls and offered him good drugs. Having someone like Dennis Wilson believe in Manson and his music was a major coup. It was opening doors to other people who could help him and make things happen. And it was also confirming to the acolytes that he's really something. It was a very exciting time for them.
Manson wants his message spread through his music and pressures Dennis Wilson to get him a record deal.
So Dennis introduced him to Terry Melcher. And Terry Melcher, of course, is the son of Doris Day. He was a very well-known record producer at the time.
And he tried to persuade them with his girls, but ultimately he didn't get what he wanted. And he was angry about it. And in the end, they just kind of said, "Goodbye, Charlie," and they moved on. And so he became very angry.
Manson goes over to Melcher's house on Cielo Drive to complain, unaware that he's moved out, and shows up in the middle of a party given by one of the new residents, Sharon Tate.
Charles Manson was just a very angry man who wanted to get revenge on all the people that didn't let him be the star that he thought he should be.
You are his enemy now. And he's going to go into fight and flight mode because now he perceives you as a threat.
By the spring of 1969, the Manson family had been living together at Spahn Ranch happily for the most part. But after being rejected by record producer Terry Melcher, things began to take a dark turn.
They're against me now. It was really unfortunately not uncommon language for a messianic cult leader, but he was really becoming angry.
Diane had a hard time following Manson's new strict doctrine and constant lectures.
She was a teenager, and some of it was like, "You already said that, Charlie. I don't want to listen to this. I want to go party, or let's go have sex or do drugs or something."
The first person I saw abused was Diane by Charlie. He slapped her in front of me, and I faced him with it. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "You stay out of it." She was calling for it.
Catherine also finds herself at the receiving end of Manson's rage.
He jumped on me and punched me in the face, in the solar plexus. He told me to stand up. I did, and he started strangling me. And he asked me if I was ready to die.
He would often ask his followers, "Would you die for me?" He is filling their heads with this idea that you need to be willing to kill or be killed.
In November 1968, the Beatles released their iconic White Album.
One of the songs was Helter, Skelter. He interpreted those lyrics as totally relevant to his idea of reality, and that there would be this white-black race war and this apocalypse.
He said he learned about that by being accepted by blacks in prison, and they'd tell him that they were going to have this revolution, and they'd had enough, and they were going to just take over. So what we need to do is find a place and wait till it's all over.
Civil and racial tensions in Los Angeles in the late 60s also begin to play into Manson's new brand of apocalyptic thinking.
We didn't have a television, and he was our news. He saw Watts burning, and so in his mind, that meant it's getting close. It's going to happen pretty soon.
July 1st, 1969, The dominoes begin to fall when Tex Watson gets into a bad dope deal with a black man named Bernard Lotsa Papa Crow, and Manson decides to take business into his own hands.
He went to save the day and ended up shooting Bernard Crow in the stomach and thought he killed him. Bernard Crow played dead.
The next day, Manson watches in the news that a member of the Black Panthers got killed. Manson didn't know it at the time, but Crow wasn't a Black Panther, and he wasn't dead.
He put two and two together, and he thought he had just killed a black man. He thought he must be a Black Panther, because he didn't know Bernard Crow, who wasn't a Black Panther, by the way. In his mind, we had to get off that ranch because the Black Panthers knew where we lived, and we had killed one of them.
Even though Bernard Crow recovers from his injuries and never seeks revenge, Charlie's paranoia worsens every day.
Darkness started to happen when Charles Manson was beginning to feel this threat. He was, in my opinion, descending into delusion.
Charlie was convinced that this race war was really going to come down and happen, and that we had been introduced to the desert as a place to get away.
He was able to find a Hopi legend that said there is a bottomless pit. It leads to prehistoric ocean under the ground, and that's where we will hide out. And he said, and we won't age. We're going to be the same age as when we go in, and the race war is going to happen, and the black people are going to win, except they're not going to know how to handle the leadership because they've never been free. And so we're going to come out and take over, and we are going to run the world.
Manson discovers a remote property in Death Valley called Barker Ranch and decides to move the family there.
Barker Ranch it's quite the experience to get there. It's quite a hour's drive, and then along the Panamint Range. Then once you're there, once you're at Barker Ranch, there's nothing for like miles.
I remember, it was a lot prettier and more alive back then. There were fun times. I remember, like decorating the place with bottles and rocks and, making paths. And we were planting, I remember planting a garden in some of these, fenced off areas. And I remember also wanting to commit suicide here. I was just really scared. It was night. I felt alone and scared and trapped, and I was going to go in that little building behind me, that brown building that still exists. It was like a workshop, and smack myself in the head with a hammer. And I feel like God stayed my hand. It was a way out, a way out of that dilemma. These were the front stairs going up to the ranch. There was a covered patio all on these two sides of the house. Two little bunk houses there. And this would have been the doorway to the kitchen.
This is where cults become dangerous. He has now isolated all of his followers. He has a hierarchy. He has made certain people feel more special than others. He lets them into the inner circle and the secrets of what he's planning. He also is telling them his truth is the only truth. He's telling them that he is God. They are believing that he is God. Therefore, he is infallible.
And believing in Manson will soon have deadly consequences for some of his followers. at the age of 32. In order to survive the system after spending more than half his life imprisoned, Charles Manson has learned how to be a master manipulator. When he finds freedom, he uses this persuasion skill to convert young disenfranchised youngsters to join his hippie commune. But toward the summer of '69, Manson becomes more paranoid and delusional, convincing his followers of an impending race war and that following him to the desert is their only salvation. Through a series of exercises, he trains them on how to survive the worst to come.
At first it was an exercise, and then it turned into burglaries. But they had a cute little name, Creepy Crawlies. It was kind of fun because we changed the tape, the chairs around, put them on top of the table, sat behind a couch very quietly while people watched television, and they never knew that they were in the house.
Manson also invites the motorcycle club, the Straight Satans, to help protect his ranch in exchange for sexual services and free drugs.
The next domino was when the motorcycle club decided they were going to have a 10-year reunion, and they wanted something different to do.
Charlie's drug-dealing friend Bobby Beausoleil knows a mescaline supplier named Gary Hinman. On Charlie's behalf, Bobby agrees to be a middleman, and the bikers give him $1,000 to pay Hinman for the drugs.
With mescaline, that if you don't have a clean system, you'll get sick before you get high. But they were sure that they were poisoned and gotten sick and it was bad drugs, and they wanted their money back.
Manson sent Mary Bruner, Susan Atkins, and Bobby Beausoleil to persuade Gary Hinman to give them money.
Gary refuses, and things quickly spiral out of control. They call Manson, who decides to take matters into his own hands.
Charlie had a sword from one of the motorcycle guys, and as soon as Gary Hinman opened the door and Charlie just slashed his face without asking any questions, Bobby said, "What did you do that for? I had it all settled." And Charlie said, "I'm just teaching you to be a man."
And then he left because Manson didn't want to get his hands dirty, and he said, "Okay, get the money from him. You know what to do."
2 days later, Hinman is found dead in his apartment, smothered with a pillow and stabbed by Bobby Beausoleil and Manson follower Susan Atkins. Following Manson's directions about pinning blame on the Black Panthers, before they leave, Atkins scrawls on the wall the words "political piggy" in Hinman's blood.
They thought they covered themselves and that people were going to think that the Black Panthers did it. And so nobody would even draw attention to what they were doing.
August 6th, 1969, a week after Gary's body is discovered, police pull Bobby over. He's driving Gary Hinman's car. Police find a bloody knife hidden in the tire well, and Beausoleil is arrested for Hinman's murder.
I think after Bobby was arrested, Charlie had a psychotic break. He went into total psychotic self-preservation.
Manson is convinced that if he can shift murder suspicions from Bobby Beausoleil to the Black Panthers, he can get his friend out of jail and also ignite the self-prophesized race war that he's named Helter, Skelter, after the Beatles song. On the night of August 8th, 1969, Manson sends 4 family members, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Tex Watson, to the house on Cielo Drive that he had visited earlier that year while looking for record producer Terry Melcher.
He told them to just commit horrible murders and to make sure that it was something that could be attributed to the Black Panthers and to make it as horrible as possible. And then, he left.
The 4 family members approach the property and are surprised by the headlights of a car coming toward them down the driveway. Tex Watson orders the women to hide in the bushes while he halts the vehicle. The driver is Stephen Parent, a friend of the house's caretaker William Garrettson. After slashing Parent's wrist with a knife, Tex fires 4 bullets, killing the man instantly.
Then they went up to the house and they viciously murdered Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, Wojciech Frykowski, who was a friend of Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate's husband, and Abigail Folger, who was the heiress to the Folger coffee dynasty, and then Jay Sebring, who was a good friend of Sharon Tate.
In an attempt to connect this crime with Hinman's murder, the group writes the word pig on the front door with Tate's blood before leaving the scene. The following morning, America wakes up in horror when watching the news.
What was reported in all of the media was how vicious this attack was, because it was just this gratuitous, horrible, vicious, animalistic, savage crime.
Manson uses the news of the killings to help convince the rest of his followers that it must have been committed by members of the Black Panthers and that the race war he'd been prophesizing had begun.
So he took out the headlines and told us it's all started. So that's the first time I heard about anything.
August 10th, 1969. Manson decides to take his race war prophecy to the next level. A day after the brutal killings on Cielo Drive, he drives the same group, along with family member Leslie Van Houten and a newly friended ranch hand Steve Clem Krogan, to the home of supermarket owner Lino LaBianca and his wife Rosemary.
So he takes them all to this home, and he goes into the home and he shows them how to tie them up. He uses, I believe, a leather from his clothing, and they cover their faces and they wrap lamp cords around them, and then he leaves.
Manson, Steve, and Linda head back to the ranch, leaving the others with the terrified LaBianca couple.
It was Patricia Krenwinkel and Tex Watson who were doing the stabbing. Eventually, Tex said to Leslie, "Do something."
Leslie takes the knife from Tex and ferociously attacks and kills Rosemary. The police investigation later reveals that Rosemary is stabbed 47 times. Using the victim's blood, Krenwinkel writes "Rise," "Death to Pigs," and a misspelled Helter Skelter on a wall, while Tex Watson carves the word "war" on Lino LaBianca's stomach. DA office prosecutors would say later that the only reason for the murders is that the LaBiancas were white and rich.
And they murdered them in some kind of effort, they thought, to bring on this Helter Skelter, this prediction of doomsday. But in reality, it was just about Charlie Manson getting even for all the people he felt had not given him his due. And it was, again, this kind of malignant, narcissistic rage.
5 days later, the police raid the Spahn movie ranch, yet this operation would be unrelated to the Tate and LaBianca murders.
So they just arrested people for maybe dune buggies, stolen cars and dune buggies, and then they let everybody out.
But the raid doesn't stop the family's murderous spree. The next victim is a 35-year-old stuntman who hangs out frequently at the ranch named Donald Shea, nicknamed Shorty.
Charlie was sure that Shorty Shea had brought it on because he said that Shorty Shea wanted to be manager of the ranch.
On August the 25th, Tex, Clem, and a friend of Manson named Bruce Davis viciously murder Shea. 8 years later, police find his skeletal remains buried at the ranch. Late in the summer of 1969, the walls of Charles Manson's peaceful California hippie commune are beginning to crumble. Charlie's rejection by the outside world has changed him, and in his anger, he's manipulated some of his followers to commit horrible murders in Los Angeles. While he attempts to shift the blame for those murders into his vision of a race war, he and his family retreat into the California desert.
The worst thing to happen is for a cult leader to have followers who have nothing to do, because they'll lose the programming. So by keeping them busy and occupied, he's keeping them under his spell.
Yet on October 10th and 12th, Barker Ranch would be raided by the Eno County Sheriff's Department, but like in the previous raid at Spahn's Ranch that were based on reports of stolen vehicles, these raids would also not be related to the brutal murders. The family members who committed them have so far been able to keep their secret.
Most people that lived there didn't know that some of the people had been the perpetrators. I was highly suspicious by that time for some different reasons, and I thought the raid was about that. I was surprised when it wasn't. The second raid, the very last raid, is when we all ran to the desert, and then Charlie decided to burn up an earth mover. For people that are hiding, I mean, that's the crazy thing to do. And then we were chased around by the local sheriff's deputies.
I think I had just finished washing my hair, so I had just wrapped it in a towel. And then I don't know if they knocked at the door or they just I think they just blew it open and said, you're under arrest. Well, he was right here in the kitchen, but he disappeared, and come with me, I'll show you the little bathroom round this corner. He ducked into here, and where that little triangle is in there, that area was where the cupboard was. He had to have been like this, with the door closed, because there would have been a pipe. Would have been a pipe there, and the sink. So he was like tucked in here when they found him. He said something silly like, "Oh, hi, I'm Charlie Manson," or something like that.
Charles Manson and many members of his family are arrested, and this time held for trial for vandalism and car theft.
Are you all happy with your courts?
Yeah.
Are you happy with it?
Yet there were still some members who managed to escape. While walking on Venice Beach, two of them meet Aesop, the nickname of a 24-year-old singer and actor named Mark Ross.
I told them that I was living in Venice and I had a house and I was close to the beach. And, if they were down that way, they were welcome to stop by and, hang out. And either that night or the next night, 4 girls showed up and 3 guys. They stayed for a while. I mean, it was, a month or so.
Lynette Squeaky Frome assumes the leadership and tries to reunite the remaining family while Manson is in prison. Then one day, things take an abrupt turn.
What happened was fate intervened. Susan Atkins had been arrested, and she was now implicated in the Gary Hinman murder.
While in custody, Atkins let slip out that she was involved in the Tate-LaBianca murders.
Susan started telling her cellmates because she was sure that he was a messiah and that this was all real, and she was kind of like bragging about it to her cellmates and trying to get them on board.
Atkins' cellmates tell authorities about her confession, and that leads them to Charles Manson and an indictment in the case.
Charles Manson so completely controlled his followers that they became weaponized, and that he used them as a weapon to murder people. And so therefore, even though he wasn't at the scene of the crime, he was responsible for the murders.
Atkins' admission also leads to the arrest of Patricia Krenwinkel, one of the family members who is staying at Mark Ross's house.
When I saw on television the talk about Manson and the girls that were on the ranch and stuff, and I looked at the girls and I said, God, that's some of those girls are the girls that were living with me down in Venice. I mean, and they were cool. I mean, we got along great, and they weren't murderers, for goodness sakes.
Aesop would find this entire case to be a great subject for a documentary. Following the arrests, he moves up to Spahn Ranch and follows the 3 members of the Manson family during one of the most sensational media trials in California history.
After 194 days of testimony and 43 hours of jury deliberation,
the longest and most bizarre case in California history, was brought to a first phase close when the jury of 12 delivered verdicts of guilty on 27 counts of first-degree murder against Charles Manson and 3 members of his family. Of Manson's original family, only 3 are left in Los Angeles. The rest are either in jail or in hiding, taking care of the Manson children.
We don't even think about him not coming out because he is. He is going to get out. And he'll be out when all the jails open up and everybody's going to be free.
Despite being on trial, Manson's influence over his followers is evident.
I feel good feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad. I'm not against you. I'm not against you. Huh?
Are you bitter?
Bitter? No. No.
I feel you paid some price so far.
Price?
So he had a lot of time with Patricia, Susan, and Leslie, because they'd do crazy things, so they would get kicked out of the trial, and they could have a meeting in the back. So that way he could have his time with them and keep them on the right path, as far as he was concerned.
His influence extends even outside of the courtroom walls.
One day, Squeaky, who visited him more than anyone, she was kind of like the manager, said, "We're going to take off." So we started driving to the Sunset Strip, and then she said, "We're all going to take acid, and we're going to crawl back to the Hall of Justice to show the world how much we all love Charlie."
They even try to pull Aesop into their plans.
There were a couple of things that happened out at the ranch that I was not comfortable with, but I sort of let pass. But when one of the girls comes up and says, "We want you to kill the judge," I'm going, and I don't know if it was that night. Very soon, I walked away, like in the middle of the night. I just said, enough's enough. I have no reason to want to be here. And I left.
The penalty phase of the trial begins Thursday. Some say this could last 2 months or even more. Defense attorneys and the defendants will no longer argue innocence or guilt, but rather life or death.
On January the 25th, 1971, after 10 days of deliberation, the jury give their verdict.
What is the verdict? For all of them?
Yeah, for all of them.
You know what? The system has just judged itself. It's just judged itself. It's all a matter of time now.
And of course, then when the death penalty was revoked in California, the sentence was changed to life imprisonment.
Each one of the jailed Manson family has been trying for parole, but the tide has been against them, and they will most likely never see the outside again. Charles Manson died in prison on November 19th, 2017.
It's people that stop thinking for themselves, and they take one person with charisma and this strong personality, and they believe everything they say, and stop thinking themselves and stop doubting.
When one person wants to totally manipulate and overwhelm another person, is just to shower them with this love and affection. And it's like a drug. You want that more, you want it more, you want it more and more.
So I was at a point where, why think about it? There's nowhere to go. I'm being threatened. These are the only people that I have. So I just totally shut down and did what was expected of me.
Charles Manson was the first and best example of a cult of personality, because people to this day will always be obsessed with him and with this cult and with this case.